I had just closed the biggest deal of my life, the sale of my biotech company for $60 million. It wasn't just money, it was a lifetime wrapped into a single transaction, 40 years of sleepless nights, cold coffee, and stubborn belief that what I was building mattered. To celebrate, I invited my daughter and her husband to an upscale restaurant that sparkled like it was carved from glass, the kind of place where even the water came with a story. I stepped away from the table when my phone buzzed. It was the bank confirming the wire transfer. $60 million. Cleared. A lifetime's worth of work now reduced to a number on a glowing screen. I turned to head back, and that's when a young waiter stepped into my path. His hands were trembling so hard, he almost dropped the tray he was holding. "Sir," he whispered, his voice shaking, "I don't want to cause a scene, but I saw something at your table. The woman you came with. She poured something into your drink." For a heartbeat, my world stopped spinning. My pulse turned to ice, but I didn't show it. Decades of boardroom poker face held firm. "You're sure?" I asked, my voice low and calm. He nodded. "A small vial from her purse. White powder. She poured it into your wine when the man distracted you." I felt the blood drain from my face. My daughter, my own flesh and blood. I thanked the waiter quietly and told him to return to work. Then I walked back, every step heavier than the last. The table was a stage. My daughter was laughing, her husband raising a toast, the candlelight dancing across their faces like nothing had happened. I sat down, heart pounding like a ticking clock. The moment stretched. Then I moved, casual and careless, as if brushing a napkin from the table, and in that motion, I switched the glasses. Mine for hers. Nobody noticed. They were too busy smiling, too busy counting the future I had just handed them. 15 minutes later, as I pushed my steak across the plate, pretending to eat, her voice faltered mid-sentence. Her hand shook slightly, then her eyes rolled back. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered. She slumped sideways in her chair as gasps echoed across the restaurant. I stood fast, shouting her name, catching her head before it hit the floor. The scene froze, then burst into chaos. Servers running, her husband yelling, the sound of breaking glass. I shouted for help, for someone to call an ambulance. And yet, inside, I was still. I wasn't watching a tragedy. I was watching a plan collapse. The sirens came fast, flashing blue and red through the windows. As paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, I looked at her husband. His panic wasn't grief, it was calculation. He was already thinking about what went wrong, what to say, what to fix. I'd seen that look 100 times across a boardroom table, in the eyes of competitors who just realized their empire was slipping away. But this time, it wasn't business. It was betrayal, and it wore my daughter's face. As the paramedics wheeled her away, her husband grabbed my shoulder. His grip was tight, too tight. He leaned close, his voice low, almost a growl. "What did you do?" I looked him dead in the eye, every ounce of fear drained from me. "What did she drink?" I asked softly. He flinched. He didn't answer. He couldn't. That night, as the flashing lights faded into the distance, I understood something with painful clarity. Whatever this was, whatever they had planned for me, it wasn't over. It had just begun. Because sometimes, the deadliest poison isn't in your glass, it's in the people you trust most. The hospital lights felt harsher than any boardroom spotlight I'd ever stood under. I followed the stretcher through a corridor that smelled like bleach and panic. My daughter was motionless, her skin pale, a thin tube taped under her nose. Her husband was already talking to a nurse, his voice rising just enough to sound worried but not enough to sound guilty. It was a performance, and I could see every rehearsed note of it. "She's allergic to shellfish," he said quickly. "Must have been the scallops." The nurse frowned, jotting down notes, but I could tell she wasn't buying it. Neither was I. I stayed silent, standing back letting him play his part. That's what he wanted, the image of a frail old man out of his depth. Let him believe it. A doctor walked in, mid-30s, tired eyes but sharp as a blade. "We'll run a full toxicology," he said. My daughter's husband stiffened. "That's unnecessary," he argued. "It's an allergy. Just give her an EpiPen." The doctor didn't even look at him. "No rash. No swelling. Her airways are clear. This isn't anaphylaxis." His voice cut through the room like glass. "This isn't overdose." The color drained from her husband's face. "That's impossible," he snapped, his tone cracking under pressure. "She's not on anything." The doctor turned to me. "Sir, do you know what she took?" I looked at the man beside me, his jaw tight, sweat beading on his forehead. "No," I said quietly, "but I think we're about to find out." The results came back faster than expected. The doctor's expression told me the truth before his words did. "She has a massive dose of antipsychotic medication in her system," he said flatly, "enough to cause seizures, confusion, and symptoms resembling a stroke." He glanced between us. "This was no accident." The husband's voice broke into a shaky laugh. "You're saying she poisoned herself? That's insane." The doctor didn't blink. "Or someone poisoned someone else." He didn't say it to me. He said it to him. That moment, standing in that white room with monitors beeping in the background, I realized how deep this went. They hadn't meant to kill me. No, death was too obvious. They wanted to erase me, to make me look senile, confused. A perfect target for a conservatorship. $60 million and an old man's fading mind. It would have been clean, legal, and permanent. My company, my estate, my name, all handed over to them while I drooled into a plastic cup somewhere. Forgotten, but fate or maybe justice had other plans. My daughter had drunk her own trap. Her husband's perfect plan was unraveling in real time, and he didn't even have the sense to see it. He paced the waiting room, whispering frantically into his phone. I caught fragments. Read, "Gone wrong ... fix this. Hearing at 8. He didn't know I was listening. He didn't know I'd been trained all my life to read people like open books. Every nervous twitch, every broken word, they all told me exactly what I needed to know. There was a hearing. There was a doctor named Reed. And there was still a plan in motion. I waited for him to leave the room, then walked to the vending machine alcove and pulled out my phone. My reflection in the glass didn't look like a broken father anymore. It looked like what I used to be, a man who built something from nothing, and who wouldn't let anyone take it from him. I called my lawyer. "Meet me at the office," I said. Now, he didn't ask why. He never does. As I walked back past the waiting room, my daughter's husband was still on the phone, pacing, desperate. "If the old man finds out," he hissed. He stopped mid-sentence, eyes snapping toward me. I smiled softly, just enough to make him wonder what I'd heard. Then I turned and walked out. He followed me with his stare, that mix of fear and fury that only cowards wear. The war had just changed hands. It wasn't his move anymore. It was mine. Because when you try to frame a man as insane, You better pray he never finds out he's still sane enough to fight back. By the time I reached my office, the city was still half asleep, wrapped in fog and silence. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I wanted the dark. It made thinking easier. My lawyer arrived 15 minutes later. Sharp suit, sharper mind. The only man I trusted when the world turned into a chessboard. What happened? He asked. I told him everything. From the dinner to the switch, to the collapse. I spoke like I used to in board meetings. No emotion, no hesitation, just facts stacked on facts. When I finished, he didn't say a word for a full minute. Then, finally, they tried to take you down legally, Richard, not kill you, replace you. His tone was low, almost admiring. That's not greed. That's strategy. I leaned back, feeling the weight of every year I'd lived, pressing on my chest. Strategy built on betrayal, I muttered. He nodded. And that's exactly what we'll use against them. He poured me a coffee, the kind that tastes like burnt truth. This Doctorito, sure that's the name. I nodded. Good, I'll find him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen like a man firing bullets. We'll hit him where it hurts. First, reputation, credibility, money. Everyone's weak somewhere. His confidence steadied me. I wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. He looked up from his notes. What's your daughter's husband doing right now? I almost laughed, trying to keep the story from collapsing. He's probably calling every contact he has, hoping to twist this back in his favor before morning. My lawyer's eyes narrowed. Morning. I hesitated. He mentioned the hearing. 8 a.m. Something about a conservatorship. That word hung in the air like a loaded gun. Conservatorship, he repeated slowly. Meaning, by sunrise, you were supposed to be legally incompetent. It was almost beautiful in its precision. Drug me, get me hospitalized, have the corrupt doctor testify that I'd lost touch with reality, then seize control of everything I owned. A perfect heist, clean and signed by the law itself. But they made one fatal error. They underestimated time. And time was still mine. My lawyer's voice cut through my thoughts. We can turn this, but you have to stop thinking like a victim. Richard, think like the man who built Apex from nothing. Think like the man they were stupid enough to challenge. I looked at him, and for the first time since the dinner, I felt that version of me wake up again. The calm, the precision, the hunger. The CEO was back. Pull every email, every file, I said. I want their names, their timelines, their motives. If there's a hearing at 8, we'll be there at 7:45. He smiled, slow and sharp. Let's give them their show, he said. The adrenaline that had been burning through my veins started to shift into focus. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger clouds judgment. I was something colder, resolved. I picked up my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. It's Richard, I said when the voice answered. I need a favor. Quietly track a man named Reed. Find out who owns him. Outside, the city began to wake, lights flickering one by one, unaware that somewhere above them, a father was preparing to dismantle his own child's betrayal piece by piece. My lawyer looked at me across the desk. You know this doesn't end clean, he said. It never does, I replied, but it will end. I took one last sip of bitter coffee and set the cup down. The taste lingered, like the memory of trust broken too deep to fix. Let's go to war. Because sometimes revenge isn't about getting even, it's about reminding them who they tried to erase. The cab ride from the hospital was a blur of neon reflections and sirens fading into the night. I didn't go home. I went to my daughter's house instead. It was the same place where every Christmas had been staged for years, smiles for photos, laughter rehearsed like lines. Now it was a crime scene hiding behind good furniture. I knew where they kept a spare key, under a dead plant by the back door. I let myself in quietly, not out of fear, but respect for what I was about to destroy. The house smelled of perfume and deception. I walked straight to her office. The computer sat open on a spotless white desk, as if it were waiting for me. No password. Of course, they never thought I'd be the one searching. They never thought I was capable of this kind of darkness. They forgot who taught them how to think. I typed one name into the search bar. Red. It took seconds. Dozens of emails flooded the screen. Their subject lines innocent but their meaning anything but. I opened the first one and read. It wasn't business. It was a blueprint. The contingency plan, they called it that. As if my mind and my money were just obstacles to manage. There were messages between my daughter, her husband, and that doctor. They spoke in careful terms, but the truth bled through every line. The dosage, the timing, the dinner. It was all here. The doctor had supplied the drug. The husband had coordinated the petition. My daughter had agreed to deliver the dose. I scrolled, my heart steady, not racing, steady like it always was when numbers and lies revealed themselves. Then he saw it: emergency conservatorship petition, Richard Shaw. The file attached. I opened it. My name filled the top in bold. Below it, a list of accusations, confusion, paranoia, incompetence, and there, at the bottom, the name of their key witness, Dr. Reed, scheduled for 8 in the morning. I looked at the clock, 3:55. I copied everything onto a drive and slipped it into my pocket. The plan they had written was now my weapon. I walked out the same door I had entered, locking it quietly behind me. The air outside was colder, sharper, almost clean. For a moment I looked up at the stars, wondering if my late wife could see any of this. She had warned me. Over and over I never listened. I thought love was stronger than greed. I was wrong. The cab driver asked where to. Downtown, I said, and step on it. By the time we pulled into the underground garage of my lawyer's office, the sky had started to pale with the hint of dawn. The world would wake soon, and when it did, it would find me ready. I walked through the empty halls, the echo of my footsteps steady and measured, no more hesitation. The door to his office was already open. He stood by the window, coffee in hand, like he'd been waiting for me. I tossed the flash drive onto his desk. Everything's there, I said. He plugged it in, scanned the first few lines, and exhaled a single sharp laugh. They wrote their own confession, he said. This is going to be poetic. He turned toward me. You realize, Richard, once we start this, it's not just about money anymore. It's going to expose everything. You'll burn bridges that can't be rebuilt. I looked out the window at the sleeping city. Then let it burn, I said. He nodded once. The war had begun, and for the first time that night, I smiled, because when they plan your downfall in secret, the best revenge is to let them walk into their own courtroom and watch the trap close. By the time dawn brushed the skyline, my lawyer had assembled a strategy so sharp it could cut through steel. His office was quiet except for the sound of his pen tapping against the desk and the slow hiss of the coffee machine. I stood by the window watching the city come alive. Every light below a reminder that somewhere out there, my enemies still believed they were ahead. You've got less than 2 hours, he said, breaking the silence. The hearing's at 8, courtroom 3B. They think you'll be too confused to show up. Let's prove them wrong. He opened a folder filled with printouts. I've already sent a team to dig into this doctor. Financial records, licenses, any dirt we can use. There's always something. He looked at me. You should rest, Richard. You've been awake all night. I shook my head. Rest is for men who've already won. He gave me a thin smile. Then let's make sure you do. The phone on his desk rang once, his private line. He picked up, listened silently, then scribbled a note. When he hung up, his eyes were darker. Got him, he said. Your doctor friend owes over 300 grand in gambling debts. Guess who the creditor is? He paused just long enough for the impact to land. A shell company owned by your daughter's husband. I didn't move, didn't speak. Just let the truth sink in. So he wasn't just helping them, I said slowly. He belonged to them. My lawyer nodded. Exactly. And that means we don't just have a family betrayal. We have conspiracy, fraud, and medical malpractice all rolled into one. He poured another coffee, black and bitter. You ready for this? He asked. I met his gaze. I've been ready since the moment she lifted that glass. We walked out into the hallway, the sound of our footsteps echoing through marble and silence. I could feel the weight of the flash drive in my pocket, their own words, their own proof, every message time-stamped and undeniable. Outside, the city was awake now. People walking to work, unaware that somewhere in a courthouse, the most personal kind of war was about to start. As we reached the elevator, my phone rang. I didn't need to see the name to know who it was. Answer it, my lawyer said. Put him on speaker. I did. The voice that came through was calm. Too calm. Dad, where are you? We've been worried sick. The act was perfect concern, layered over control. I'm fine, I said, keeping my tone soft, shaky, just as he expected. I couldn't stay at the hospital. He sighed, pretending to be relieved. I understand. But listen, the doctor's on his way to your house. He just wants to check on you, make sure you're okay. He said it's important. My lawyer smirked. There it is, he mouthed. I leaned into the lie. I don't need a doctor, I said, letting my voice tremble. I just need rest. He kept pushing. Dad, please. This isn't up for debate. Just let him in. I'll be there in half an hour. I could almost hear the smile forming behind his calm tone. He thought I was scared, broken, lost. All right, I whispered. I'll wait. When the call ended, my lawyer laughed quietly. He's sending the doctor to your empty house while he walks straight into court to declare you insane. He's about to be very disappointed. I adjusted my tie. Then let's not keep him waiting. The courthouse was only a few blocks away. We moved fast, the morning air sharp against my face. Every step felt deliberate, every thought razor clear. The same clarity I'd had the day I built my company from a rented garage. Only this time I wasn't building, I was dismantling. By the time we reached the courthouse doors, I could see them through the glass. My daughter's husband pacing, his lawyer whispering, a nervous doctor glancing at his watch. They looked like men ready to win. I smiled to myself. Let them think that. For now, because sometimes the only way to beat a trap is to let them believe you've already fallen into it. The courthouse smelled like old paper, disinfectant, and secrets. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me as my lawyer and I stepped through the double doors of courtroom 3B. Inside, everything was exactly as expected. My daughter's husband sat at the front, wearing his best suit and the face of a man about to inherit a fortune. Beside him was a cheap lawyer with too much hair gel and too little integrity. And next to them sat the doctor, nervous, pale, adjusting his tie every 30 seconds like a man choking on guilt. My lawyer leaned close. "They're early," he whispered. "Good. Let's keep it that way." We took seats at the back, silent observers for now. The judge hadn't arrived yet. My presence went unnoticed for a few seconds until my daughter's husband turned, expecting an empty bench and instead finding me staring right back at him. His face drained of color. He mouthed my name, but no sound came out. My lawyer leaned in again. "You see that look? That's the sound of a plan collapsing." I kept my voice low. He thought I'd be drooling in a hospital bed right now. And instead, my lawyer said, "You're sitting in the front row of his downfall." The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge entered, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice that could cut glass. "We are here to consider the petition for emergency conservatorship of Mr. Richard Shah," she began, "filed by his son-in-law." The words tasted bitter even in her mouth. The husband stood, all fake concern and practiced humility. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not about money. It's about care. My father-in-law has shown alarming signs of confusion and paranoia. He's been mismanaging his finances, and last night he became violent during dinner. We fear he's losing touch with reality." I almost laughed. Violent? I'd spent the night watching him unravel like cheap fabric. But I let him speak, let him hang himself with his own lies. The judge nodded. "You've brought medical testimony." "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "Dr. Reed can confirm." The doctor stood, sweating through his collar. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and began to speak. "I have been treating Mr. Shah for cognitive decline over the past 6 months. That was when my lawyer rose. "Objection, Your Honor. That's a lie." The room froze. The judge turned toward us, eyebrows raised. "And you are Mark Wright," my lawyer said smoothly, handing her a document. "Mr. Shah's legal counsel. And before this proceeding continues, I'd like to enter this into evidence." He handed over the printed emails, every single message that exposed the plot, subject line after subject line, their signatures, their dates. The judge read silently, her expression hardening with each line. "Mr. Wright," she said finally, "are you alleging fraud?" "Not alleging, Your Honor," my lawyer said calmly. "Proving." He pointed toward the husband. "This man, along with this doctor, conspired to have my client declared incompetent in order to seize control of $60 million. The drug used was traced to a prescription written by Dr. Reed under a false name. We have medical confirmation, toxicology reports, and full correspondence detailing their plan." The husband's lawyer jumped up, stammering, "That's outrageous." "None of this." "Sit down," the judge snapped. The silence that followed was suffocating. The husband's face was white, his hands shaking as he tried to speak. "Your Honor, he's lying. He hacked my wife's computer." The judge didn't blink. "Then perhaps we should call in a forensic technician to verify the source of the emails," she said evenly. "And while we're at it, I'll request the hospital's toxicology report." My lawyer folded his arms. "Already submitted, Your Honor." The husband's mouth opened, but no words came. He turned toward the doctor, desperate for backup. "Say something," he hissed. But the doctor was already crumbling. I can't," he muttered. "They know. The husband's expression twisted into something monstrous, fear and fury mixed in equal parts. He turned to me, his voice cracking. "You'd think this changes anything. You'd think you've won?" I met his gaze. "I don't think," I said quietly. No. The judge's gavel came down hard. "This hearing is adjourned, effective immediately. All accounts and assets are to remain frozen pending investigation. Mr. Reed, you will surrender your medical license to the board within 24 hours. Mr. Ford, you will remain available for questioning." The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder as the bailiff led them away. I stayed seated, calm, steady. My lawyer leaned toward me. "You did it," he whispered. "No," I said. "We just started. Because sometimes, exposing the truth is only the first move and the real game begins after the gavel falls." The sound of the gavel still echoed in my mind long after we left the courtroom. Outside, the morning air hit like a shock to the system, cold, clean, and full of noise. Reporters were already gathering, drawn by whispers of a fallen doctor and a $60 million scandal. My lawyer shielded me with his coat as we pushed through the crowd. "No comments," he said firmly. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Every flash of a camera, every shouted question, was just confirmation that the truth was spreading faster than their lies ever could. We slipped into a waiting car and pulled away from the courthouse. My lawyer loosened his tie, exhaling. "That was only the first battle. Richard," he said, "they'll spin it, deny everything, and try to rebuild the story. You ready for the next one?" I stared out the window, watching the city blur past. "They built this on deceit," I said quietly, "and deceit doesn't rebuild it, only collapses slower." He nodded, tapping his phone. "I've already filed motions to freeze all their joint accounts. The doctor will face the board by tomorrow and will push criminal charges by next week. But your daughter..." He paused. "She's in the psychiatric ward under observation. She's stable, but she'll be questioned soon." I didn't respond. Her face kept flashing in my head, not the woman from last night, but the little girl who used to fall asleep in my office chair while I worked late. "She made her choice," I said finally. "She just didn't understand the cost." The car stopped at my office building. We went up to the top floor, the space I'd built brick by brick, idea by idea. It still smelled faintly of chemicals and ambition. I walked past the awards, the framed patents, the photos of smiling employees who believed in what we built. "You've really built all this from nothing," my lawyer sighed almost to himself. "No," I said. "I built it from trust. That was the real mistake." He turned toward me, his eyes sharp. "Then fix it." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. He was right. It wasn't enough to survive the betrayal. I had to redefine what I stood for. The company was gone, sold, absorbed, but my legacy wasn't. I opened the drawer of my old desk and pulled out a small notebook, its pages filled with numbers, contacts, and forgotten dreams. "There's something they didn't know," I said, flipping through it. "The Apex sale wasn't just cash. I kept the research rights to the logistics division, the infrastructure, the networks. They still have my name on them." My lawyer's eyes widened. Meaning, I said, closing the book. "The same system they used to move their secrets is still mine to control." He smiled slowly. "You're not just cleaning up, are you?" "No," I said, the calm returning to my voice. "I'm finishing it. We spent the next hour drafting letters, one to the medical board, one to federal investigators, and one to the media. Every fact, every timestamp, every proof of the conspiracy was laid out with surgical precision. No spin, no emotion, just truth. I wasn't seeking sympathy. I was building the final version of my defense, the kind that doesn't just protect you but destroys everything that tried to break you. As I signed the last page, my lawyer's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's him," he said. "He's calling." I nodded. "Put it on speaker." The voice that came through was raw, unsteady, desperate. "Richard, please, we can fix this." "I can fix this." I almost didn't recognize it. Gone was the polished tone, the arrogance. What remained was fear. "It's too late," I said calmly. "You tried to erase me. Now you'll have to live with the fact that I'm still here." There was silence, then a whisper. "She didn't want to hurt you." My jaw tightened. "She poured the glass," I said. That was enough. I ended the call. The room fell silent. My lawyer looked at me carefully. "What now?" I turned toward the window again, watching the city pulse with life below. "Now," I said, "I make sure they never get a second chance. Because forgiveness is mercy, and mercy is something I no longer owe anyone." By evening, the news had spread everywhere. Headlines screamed about a biotech magnate betrayed by his own family. Phrases like inheritance fraud and conspiracy exposed painted the feeds. Reporters camped outside my gate like scavengers waiting for a glimpse of blood. I didn't hide from it. I let them see me once standing tall in the doorway, silent. That image was enough. A message without words. I'm not broken. I'm awake. My lawyer called soon after. "It's official," he said. "The board suspended the doctor's license, pending investigation. The police will move in once they secure a warrant." His tone shifted. "Careful. Your daughter's husband is lawyering up. He'll blame her. He'll say she was unstable, manipulated by grief. He's going to twist the truth again." I stared at my reflection in the window, the face looking back harder than it had ever been. "Let him," I said. "I don't need to fight lies anymore. I have proof." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through my house, the same walls that once echoed with laughter now holding only quiet. The photo frames felt heavier than glass, memories sealed behind them, impossible to touch. I paused at one of my wife, her eyes still kind, even in print. "You were right," I whispered. "You always saw through them." For years, I'd ignored that instinct, choosing comfort over truth. Now, truth was all that was left, and it cut deeper than any blade. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where family dinners used to happen. Every betrayal begins with trust, I thought. Every downfall begins with love. The phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, then answered. A male voice, quiet and strained. "Sir, it's me, the waiter." For a second, I couldn't speak. His voice carried the same trembling courage from that night. "I don't know who else to call," he said. "Someone's been outside my building all day. Same car, tinted windows. I think it's him, the husband." I felt a slow cold spread through my chest. "You did the right thing calling me," I said. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll handle it." "Sir, I don't want trouble. You already saved my life," I cut in. "Now let me make sure you keep yours." I hung up and dialed my lawyer immediately. "They're watching the waiter," I said. "Send protection now." He didn't hesitate. "On it." I walked to my study, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old notebook, one my wife used to call the contingency book. It was full of private contacts, numbers of people who owed me favors from long before Apex ever made headlines. Men who didn't ask questions, only delivered results. I found the name I needed and made the call. "I have a situation," I said simply. "A tale on a young man who helped me. I want the car gone before sunrise." The voice on the other end didn't ask why. "Consider it handled." I hung up, the silence settling again like dust. Somewhere across the city, my daughter's husband was unraveling. He thought fear would keep me from moving. He was wrong. Fear sharpens men like me, turns hesitation into calculation. My phone buzzed again, an hour later. My lawyer. Police raided his office. He said, they found offshore accounts linked to shell companies in the Caymans. One of them matches the gambling debts. He paused, then added quietly, they also found proof he's been smuggling unapproved compounds, using your old shipping routes. I closed my eyes. That was it, the full picture. He hadn't just tried to rob me. He'd used my company's clean name to move illegal material across borders. He wasn't just a liar. He was a criminal. Make sure every document goes to the authorities, I said. Every name, every wire, every detail. You sure you want this public? My lawyer asked. Once this hits, there's no undoing it. I looked around the room one last time. The photos, the awards, the ghost of the life I'd built. It's already public, I said. Now I just want it finished. Because when justice knocks, the guilty don't hear footsteps. They hear everything they built beginning to fall. By the next morning, the city was already whispering about the arrests. News channels looped the same headline again and again: biotech heir under federal investigation. The footage showed agents escorting my daughter's husband through glass doors, his face hidden behind sunglasses, his arrogance finally stripped away. My lawyer called me the moment it aired. They got him, he said simply. Money laundering, prescription fraud, illegal shipment of restricted materials. The list's longer than his ambition. I said nothing for a while, just watched the screen. The man who once raised a glass to my success now walked in cuffs under flashing cameras. The irony was cruelly poetic, but satisfaction didn't come easy. Victory never tastes sweet when it comes at the cost of family. I turned off the TV and stood in the quiet of my living room. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. I poured a cup of coffee, let it sit untouched, and stared out the window. Somewhere out there, my daughter was still in a hospital bed. Maybe she was waking up. Maybe not. Maybe she was wondering how everything went so wrong. My phone buzzed again. My lawyer's voice was lower this time. "Richard, they've transferred her from observation to recovery. The doctors say she make it, but they're calling it a suicide attempt." I exhaled slowly. "That's convenient," I said. "Her husband's last defense." He paused. "Do you want to see her?" The question hung in the air. I hadn't thought about what I'd say if I saw her. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But the truth was heavier than anger, heavier than pride. "Yes," I said finally. "I need to look her in the eyes one last time." The hospital smelled the same as before, antiseptic and fear. When I entered her room, she was awake, pale, her eyes dull but aware. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if guilt had taken up space where life used to live. "Dad," she whispered, her voice raw. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, looking at her, trying to find the daughter I used to know behind the woman who tried to erase me. "Why?" I asked quietly. No anger. Just a question. She stared at the blanket, her fingers twisting the fabric. He said you were slipping, she murmured, that if we didn't act, everything you built would disappear. He said it was for you. Her voice cracked. I believed him. The pain in her voice was real, but so were the choices she made. You tried to destroy me to save me, I said. She started to cry. I didn't know what he planned. I thought I stopped her gently. You didn't think. You trusted the wrong man. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see betrayal. I saw loss. She had been manipulated, twisted by someone who saw her as leverage. It didn't make her innocent, but it made her human again. He's gone now, I said quietly, and what's left is up to you. She reached out, her hand trembling. I didn't take it. I couldn't. I wish I could undo it, she whispered. So do I said. But some things aren't meant to be undone. They're meant to be remembered. I turned to leave. Her voice stopped me at the door. Do you hate me? I paused. The truth was heavy on my tongue. No, I said, but I don't trust you either. I walked out before she could answer. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, but colder. My lawyer was waiting near the exit. How'd it go? He asked. It didn't, I said. She's alive. That's enough. He nodded. Then it's over. I shook my head. No, it's over when I make sure no one else ever uses my name again. Because sometimes closure isn't forgiveness. It's learning how to walk away without looking back. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that night refused to fade. The story spread beyond headlines and hashtags. It became a cautionary tale, whispered in boardrooms and dinner tables. The man who built an empire and nearly lost it to his own blood. Reporters kept calling. Publishers offered book deals. Even a documentary crew tried to get my side. I said no to all of it. The world didn't need another scandal to consume. It needed silence to let the truth settle. My lawyer handled the media storm. My statements the legal cleanup. He was relentless. But he understood. I wasn't fighting for image anymore. I was protecting what mattered. My legacy, not my name. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my office, watching the city burn gold under sunset. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like a mirror, loud, restless, full of people chasing something they thought would save them. I thought of my daughter again. She was still recovering, kept away from the press. I hadn't visited since that day. Maybe someday I would. Maybe not. Some wounds don't need closure, they need distance. I learned that the hard way. My lawyer joined me outside, a folder in his hand. It's done, he said. Federal indictment. Your son-in-law will spend a long time behind bars. The doctor took a deal, surrendered his license, and turned state witness. I didn't smile. I just nodded. And the waiter? I asked. He's safe, he said. We set him up with a new job, private security at one of our partner firms. The kid's got courage. That made me pause. Good, I said. He earned it. Silence stretched between us, calm and heavy. Then he opened the folder. There's one more thing, he said. The acquisition board from the new company reached out. They want you to return not as CEO, but as a consultant. They said the new management's struggling to handle the logistics you designed. They need your guidance. I looked out over the skyline. They don't need me, I said. They need someone who remembers why it was built in the first place. He waited for an answer, but I didn't give one. I didn't know if I wanted to return. Maybe some empires aren't meant to be rebuilt. Maybe they're meant to stand as monuments to remind you what ambition can cost when you forget who's sitting at your table. Later that night, I drove home alone. The streets were quieter than usual, the city softer in the dark. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, harder, but alive. My phone buzzed on. Email from an unknown address. No subject, no name. Just one line. I'm sorry, Dad. I stared at it for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. Then I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my jacket. Some apologies don't need words. Some just need to exist. I parked the car in my driveway, the same house where everything had begun and almost ended. Inside, the living room light still flickered from the storm weeks ago. I didn't fix it. Maybe I didn't want to. Some cracks are reminders, not flaws. I poured a drink, raised it to the empty room, and said softly, "Two truths, the most expensive thing I ever bought." Then I set the glass down and watched the first light of morning creep through the window. Because sometimes survival isn't about rebuilding what you lost, it's about learning to live with what's left. The days after the trial felt strangely quiet. No headlines, no reporters at my gate, no phone calls at midnight. The storm had finally passed, but silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the echo of everything that's gone. I walked through my office one last time before locking it for good. The walls were still lined with photos of beginnings, the garage where Apex was born, the first shipment that made us real, the old lab where I used to fall asleep on the floor surrounded by notes and half-finished dreams. Everything I had ever built had started with faith and almost ended with betrayal. But it didn't end. I was still standing. I drove out to the coast that evening, where the air smelled of salt and distance. The ocean had always been my reset button. You stare long enough at that horizon, and you remember how small everything else really is. I sat on a bench overlooking the water, watching the waves roll in. For a long time, I didn't think about the money, or the company, or even the betrayal. I thought about her, my daughter. How easily trust can twist when it's built on love instead of truth. I didn't hate her. I couldn't. She was a reflection of my own flutter. Belief that everything broken could be fixed with enough control. But some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be left behind. My phone buzzed. A message from my lawyer. "It's done. All charges filed. You're free." I smiled faintly. Freedom, funny. How that word feels heavier than it sounds. I pocketed the phone and looked back at the horizon. The world was still turning, and so was I. I'd survived a war not fought with bullets, but with trust, betrayal, and silence. I'd learned that power doesn't come from control, it comes from knowing when to let go. As the sun dipped into the water, I whispered to the wind, "It's over." But part of me knew it wasn't an ending. It was just a new chapter, one where I carried scars instead of regrets. I stood, buttoned my coat, and started walking back toward the car. Before I left, I turned one last time to the ocean. To everyone who ever doubted me, I said quietly, "Thank you. You reminded me what strength really looks like." When I reached the car, my reflection in the window caught me by surprise. For the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't seen before: peace. Not the kind you find in comfort, but the kind you earn by walking through fire and coming out the other side. Now it's your turn. If you followed me this far, you already know what this story was about. It wasn't about betrayal or revenge, it was about survival. About remembering who you are when the people closest to you try to make you forget. So if you're still here, still listening, take a moment and hit that subscribe button to join me for more stories just like this. Stories that remind us how truth always finds its way out of the dark. This is Richard, and you've been watching Richard's Stories. Until next time, stay sharp, stay kind, and never let anyone write your ending for you.